I'm Mike Beilstein. I'm a retired chemist. I worked at Oregon State University for 30 years in research, and I became politically active in the early 1990s with the first Gulf War, and I've kind of, I focused on peace issues, anti-war issues, but then I kind of, realized that it's the, entire American society is being abused, not just by war, but every other aspect of our life is affected by the commitment to war and imperialism that the United States represents. So I've worked on healthcare issues and climate issues and labor rights. So I've had a lot of experience, not just in the anti-war movement, but that's always kind of been the introduction to my activism. I was on the Corvallis City Council for 12 years. I ran for City Council as part of the living wage campaign in Corvallis. We accomplished a living wage ordinance. We got it. This was in 1999, and we considered $10 an hour a living wage, which is kind of funny now. $9 an hour is pretty horrible, but still there are people working for less than that in the United States. I hope not in Oregon. I kind of became enchanted with the work of the City Council, the land use issues, and other things. So I enjoyed it enough that I did it for a total of 12 years. Although it got frustrating at the end as I started to work on housing issues. It seemed like, after making a major effort and study on housing, we decided the best we could do was just keep doing what we've been doing, just try harder. And so I wasn't, I got frustrated. Well, the global economy is set up to enrich the rich at the expense of everyone else, the exploiting people and exploiting the environment. And so I think the change there has to be greater equity. I think that there has to be less extravagance as part of that equity. I mean, I think that, the 2 or 1% of the wealthiest people on earth are probably responsible for an outsized part, maybe 50% of the ecological damage and including climate change. So I think and the bottom 80% of people are responsible for 2% of our ecological crisis. So this equity. And I'd say eliminating the extremes of wealth and of course, eliminating the extremes of poverty as well. There shouldn't be any poverty in the world. To maintain the American empire requires military dominance in the world, and that's definitely the policy of the United States government. And so it's, that as a result of our economic power, we are able to suck up resources from around the world. In the United States, because it's become such the government has become such an engine of larceny, really, of theft from the entire world as well as theft from the environment and from the people of this country, that the ones that have been most essential in maintaining that system and therefore have the greatest power in our government or finance, the banks, insurance companies, and the fossil fuel industry, and thirdly the arms manufacturers, what we call the military-industrial alliance, or what, but military-industrial congressional complex. And so any decisions that are really made as far as policy within the United States or internationally are based on the desires of those three power sectors: the fossil fuels, finance, and arms. And they've got, they've kind of won over the American people, where the American people see war and the military might of the United States as the natural order of things. It's like when I ran for Congress in 2008, mostly on an anti-war peace platform with the Green Party. It was a peace slate. We had candidates in each congressional district running on the issue of peace, and it really wasn't relevant to people because they said, "What war?" You know, we were at war in Iraq, we were at war in Afghanistan, we had troops in Syria, but people say, "What war?" You know, it's such a natural state of things that people don't even think of us being engaged in war, and yet here the United States has, you know, besides those wars that you know, we're still involved in Iraq, we're still involved in Syria. You know, we've chased out of Afghanistan, fortunately for us, and maybe fortunate for the Afghanis too. But you know, the United States is constantly at war, constantly provoking those other powers which could threaten the ability of the fossil fuel industry and financiers to expand their wealth. And so the biggest threats are what geopolitically they call the Central Eurasian landmass, which, you know, of course, includes China and Russia, and Iran you could throw in as well. And so those are the big enemies that the United States has chosen, and we find ways to provoke them. We find ways to maintain in the public the idea that these are vicious people that we have to fight against. And so, rather than, you know, any sense of cooperation with China or Russia or Iran, which is really needed at this point in the world because of the ecological collapse, instead we are preparing to fight wars against them. And that's, you know, and that's great for the long term, for the short term interests of the financiers, the bankers, insurance companies, the fossil fuel companies, and the arms manufacturers who are making policy for this country. The biggest area of cooperation we need right now is on climate issues, and I think to decarbonize the global economy is essential. China, I think, would like to be you know, a partner with that. They are ready to cooperate. You know, they are the country which is, you know, most responsible for electrification, and you know, at the same time, I think even today they are still expanding coal as a source of energy, but they are also the countries who has the greatest installation of alternative energy in there, and they have an intent to rapidly rapidly switch over to a carbon-free economy. So I think that's one thing the United States should be cooperating with China on. Instead, China is going to surpass us. So, you know, I'd say 10 years from now, we will probably be buying Chinese-made electric cars because the U.S. Manufacturers are not willing to make affordable cars that can be a mass-market car. So I think we could be cooperating with China on the Russian economy is very dependent on the export of fossil fuels. So it's going to be a slow process for them to come around to the idea of a post-carbon economy. But I think, you know, right now they have no incentive to, and the United States could be providing those incentives. Our banks, our financiers, our wealth could be used to finance the transition in Russia, you know, as well as Latin America and Africa and the other parts of Asia. China is, of course, able to finance their own, and I think they're going to help a lot of other countries move into this post-carbon economy.
What's step one to making these long-term goals happen?
Well, I think to give up the idea of the American empire. To stop promoting wars around the world, to close down the over 800 military bases the United States has around the world in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and stop threatening China, stop threatening the Soviet Union. I think abolishing NATO seems like a natural thing to do. You know, the recent war in Ukraine seems to have solidified NATO. They've expanded by adding Finland and Sweden to NATO, and of course they've, you know, and all the Western European countries are pledging their support for Ukraine right now. But there would not be any threat of Russia to Western Europe if there wasn't this NATO buildup that creates the threat on their border. So I think abolishing NATO would be an important first step. I think ending U.S. military aid around the world. I think, I would, this is kind of pie in the sky, but I think there should be a ban on export of arms from the United States. I would certainly support that if we could do it. We should not be arming the world. And right now, the United States supplies about half of the weapons that are sent across borders. So we're the biggest arms merchant in the world. And, and of course, that's great for the arms industry here, but it's bad for the world. It's bad for the United States to have greater and greater levels of violence, or the capability for violence, spread around the world by U.S. industry.
Will the end of the American empire be a harm or a benefit to us, the regular American people?
Well, I could certainly see a lot of ways it would benefit the American people if, just if the money that we're putting into arms manufacture went instead into healthcare and housing and education. I don't see that happening easily because the power structures in the United States that exist that control our economy, control our government, will not allow it. But certainly we could have a much better quality of life. I think, of course, like the British Empire in its old age in the 20th century was a kind of a degenerate economy. It was totally dependent on theft from the colonies to support the economy of Britain. And so that British Empire was really set for collapse, just the way the United States is now, that we have not been investing in manufacturing and producing what we need in this country. Instead, we've are very much dependent on this system of tribute, where we extract things from Africa and South America and Asia to maintain the quality of life we have here, rather than manufacturing anything of wealth, any new wealth in this country. So I think we're in a similar situation to the late British Empire, where the lack of investment at home in the British economy actually threatened the ability to maintain the empire. And I think we're approaching that in the United States, where it's taking a greater and greater amount of our resources to maintain the empire. And we're fortunate to have this position as the world banker, and we're using that to our advantage. But it's not. I think the U.S. as the world banker is not really working well for the rest of the world, and as a result, there's our alternatives that will arise and are arising already, like the BRICS bank, the bank that's made up of from Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Which is. I think the current president is a Brazilian, and they're committed to no fossil fuel investments. They're committed to making their a high percentage of their loans in the local currencies, not in dollars. And so I think at some point the U.S. dollar, its weakness is going to be recognized by the world. At that point, it could be very tough for Americans, because we're used to having a strong dollar and being able to buy our iPads and TVs and everything else, from places where they manufacture outside the United States. So I think, that if you're asking how this could affect American people, I think it could be bad for us.
Do you consider Russia to be your enemy?
I see Russia more as a victim of the capitalists. I think that rather than a threat to me or to the United States, I really think that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States kind of imposed Yeltsin as president. Yeltsin had a policy of allowing the American capitalists to come in, American and European capitalists to come in and take over the Russian economy. When Putin came to power, he put an end to that. He reined in the oligarchs, and he, and the ones who weren't going to cooperate with a policy of a strong Russia were, were gotten rid of, and so I think that that starting around 2001, the victimization of Russia came to an end, and things were getting better there. I think I don't think Russia has any imperial designs the way the United States does, where the United States has over 800 military bases around the world. I think Russia might have 5 or 6, and they're all in countries adjacent to Russia that actually provide for their defense. I grew up with the Cold War, and I think most Americans do, and most Americans did grow up with the Cold War. Maybe if you consider the Cold War ended in 1990, maybe there's a majority now who are younger than that, but most of us, I think it's a cultural thing that the Soviet Union was evil and godless, and we had to be prepared and they were a threat to us, whether they were or not. That idea of seeing them as the enemy for a whole generation or more, or 2 generations from the end of World War II until 1990, that'll take a while to wear off.
If you had to say something positive, just think of something off the top of your head about Russia and the Russian people and its culture, history, music, literature. What would you think of?
Oh, I think the first thing I'd think of was Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. That's in literature. I don't think anybody has. I think we've got great English literature, and I'm of course more familiar with that. But it would be hard pressed to find very many English language writers of the quality of Dostoevsky or Tolstoy.
What do we have to do to change the attitude within our own country? Because this is, would you agree that is the task of anti-war activists within a country to start in their own country with what they're responsible for? Would you agree that we're responsible? I
believe that's our first task is to end this kind of spirit of militarism in the United States. Now, of course, I've been working on that for since 1991 or so. So 30 years, and it's I don't see a lot of progress. I don't know what the tactic would be. I think certainly achieving something like single-payer health care would start to change people's attitude about what our government is about. They would, I think people have to start recognizing the government as a cooperative organization for our betterment, to maintain a healthy society. But instead, so I think that would be a first step, because it would start changing people's attitude about what government is. I think most people now think of the national government as some, another oppressive force in their life, and they, I don't know. Maybe that fact they consider it an oppressive force, maybe that would be enough to stop the support of militarism, but it doesn't seem to help. I mean, militarism seems so natural in our country that every Congress votes for a bigger defense budget, and now we're up to close to $1 trillion. I can't say I have no hope. I mean, I keep working at it. I think the work on issues of climate change, maybe we'll start to get a consensus on that we need to move to a post-carbon economy in the United States. I think if we can, that's hopeful. I don't really see it. I still see this extreme power of the fossil fuel industry. So I'd hope that more and more people will be drawn in to be climate believers and climate activists. I mean, there are certainly we're close to a denial. Even if we have maybe a majority of people who say that climate is a significant issue that we need to do something about, there's very few people of that majority, if it exists, who are actually willing to do anything about it. So I think that I think the climate issue is the one area where there's some hope that the American people will wake up and start to realize that the path we're on is just going to kill us.
You have to give hope to non-Americans, all the other countries that have been victims of our empire. What would you tell them?
Well, I'd say resist neoliberalism. I can't give advice to the people of Colombia or Uganda, but what hope do they have?
You're an American, telling them, well, wait, I'm on your side, right?
I think their resistance is critical for changing the United States. I mean, it's Venezuela resisting U.S. imperialism is not going to stop it, but I think their resistance is essential. And I think if you get other countries that are resisting, if you get Peru and Brazil and Argentina, I think it will. I guess it would immediately result in a redoubling of the efforts of the U.S. to bring them under control. But I think in the long run, that resistance is essential. So I'd say their resistance, gives me hope, and I hope it gives them resistance as well. It gives them hope in their resistance. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think it has a lot of parallels to the Korean War. I think Kim Il-sung saw that they were kind of at a stalemate where the promised elections in Korea were not going to happen because the United States prevented them. The North had overwhelming power, and they could easily, with very little sacrifice, take over the South and unite the country, which is what the Korean people wanted. And so Kim Il-sung made that decision to invade South Korea and reunify the country, with the idea that it could be done with little loss of life, little cost to the economy. But then, because the United States stepped in and kind of guaranteed that there would be a continued South Korea, the war dragged on for 3 years, and most of Korea was destroyed as a result. And that Korean War has never ended. It's just we're in a truce now. And I think similarly in the Ukraine, I think Putin or whoever the deciders were in Russia decided that they'd gone since 2015 with this constant warfare against the Donbas provinces, and Russia clearly had the military power to put an end to that conflict, and to create some sort of autonomous independence, or maybe within Ukraine still, but with some autonomy, without the sort of oppression that the people in Donbass felt from the regime in Kiev. And so he thought it would not be that big a cost, and they could bring an end to this fighting, which had been going on. It killed 14,000 people since 2014.
Who benefits from the escalation?
Well, obviously the U.S. Alliance, NATO, has benefited from this, and I think that and that was there were a lot of provocations to get Russia to do this, and there were a lot of ways the United States could have avoided this from the beginning. Putin said that he wanted negotiations for permanent neutral status for Ukraine, like Vienna or like Austria and Switzerland, and he wanted some sort of autonomy for the Donbas, the eastern regions of Ukraine, and he didn't necessarily want to break up Ukraine, but and he wanted a guarantee that Ukraine would not join NATO. And if the United States had agreed to this would not have happened. If the United States had not supported Ukraine or caused Ukraine to carry on warfare since 2014 in the Donbas region, this would not have happened. So So clearly, the American power interest saw what was happening. They saw that, well, if we provoke Russia, this is going to be a great boon for the U.S. Fossil fuel industry. It's going to be a boon for the arms industry. It's going to be a boon for the American finance, because it puts the rest of the world into a recession. And so the American people pay some for that because the recession affected us too. And of course our taxes are paying for the military aid that we're providing. But all these forces who make the decisions in the United States all benefit from it, and they knew they would benefit, so they were quite happy to provoke Russia until this invasion occurred. Cut military spending, shut down the international bases, and the U.S. support for apartheid in Palestine, and take care of people here. Let's see that we have adequate housing and health care.